For the purposes of this discussion, we will utilize an actual safety data sheet accompanying a common household cleaning product. Due to the new safety data sheet requirements, you may notice that accompanying documents will vary in length. It is not unusual to encounter several pages of information. You will find the same 16 standardized sections within these documents. Therefore, it is important for you to know which sections are more relevant to you and your usage of the product. Sections 1 through 8 contain general information about the chemical, identification, hazards, composition, safe handling practices, and emergency control measures, for example, firefighting. This information should be helpful to those that need to get the information quickly. These sections include Section 1, Identification. This will include the product identifier, manufacturer or distributor name, address, phone number, emergency phone numbers, the recommended use of the product, and restrictions on use. Section 2, Hazards Identification. This section will include all hazards regarding the chemical and the required label elements. Here you may see the signal words, the hazard statements, the pictograms, the precautionary statements, and a description of any hazards not otherwise classified. Section 3, Composition and/or information on ingredients. This section will include information on chemical ingredients and trade secret claims. Here you'll get detailed information regarding the substances and mixtures included in the product. Section 4, First Aid Measures, including important symptoms and effects, acute or delayed, and the required treatment. This section describes the initial care that should be given by untrained responders to an individual who has been exposed to the chemical. The required information consists of necessary first aid instructions, description of the most important symptoms or effects to look for, and recommendations for immediate medical care and special treatment as needed when necessary. This is a very important section, especially in response to emergencies. Section 5, Firefighting Measures. Here you will see a list of suitable extinguishing techniques, equipment that is recommended, and chemical hazards from the fire. Here you will also find information on advice on specific hazards that develop from the chemicals during the fire, such as any hazardous combustion products that create when the chemical burns. You will also see recommendations on special protective equipment or precautions that firefighters should utilize. Section 6, Accidental Release Measures. This section provides recommendations on the appropriate response to spills, leaks, or releases, including containment and cleanup practices to prevent or minimize exposure to people, properties, or the environment. It may also include recommendations distinguishing between responses for large and small spills. The required information may consist of recommendations for the use of personal precautions and protective equipment, emergency procedures, including instructions on evacuations, methods and materials used for containment, and proper cleanup procedures. This is a very important section if you happen to spill the product. Section 7, Handling and Storage. This section provides guidance on the safe handling practices and conditions for safe storage of chemicals. Required information consists of precautions for safe handling, including recommendations, and recommendations on the conditions for safe storage, including incompatibilities, such as where not to put the product. Section 8, Exposure Controls and/or Personal Protection. This section indicates the exposure limits, engineering controls, and personal protective measures that can be used to minimize worker exposure. Here you will find the permissible exposure limits, the appropriate engineering controls to have on hand, any recommendations for personal protective measures to prevent illness or injury from exposure to chemicals. This will include information on the appropriate personal protective equipment and any special requirements for the personal protective equipment. All other sections contain other technical and scientific information, such as physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity information, toxicological information, exposure control information, and other information including the date of preparation and/or the last revision of the safety data sheet. These sections include Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties. Here you will see a list of the chemical's characteristics. This section identifies physical and chemical properties associated with the substance or mixture. Here you might see information on the appearance, odor, pH levels, and other relevant information. Section 10. Stability and reactivity. Here you will see a listing of the chemical stability and possibility of hazardous reactions. This information will be separated into the reactivity of the product, the chemical stability of the product, and any other relevant information, such as an indication of the possibility of hazardous reactions, a list of all the conditions that should be avoided, and a list of some classes of incompatible materials. Section 11. Toxicological information. This section identifies toxicological and health effects information or indicates that such data is not available. Required information may consist of information on the likely routes of exposure, description of the delayed, immediate, or chronic effects from short-term and long-term exposure, the numerical measures of toxicity, and a description of the symptoms. Section 12. Ecological information. This section provides information to evaluate the environmental impact of the chemical if it were to be released in the environment. Such information may include effects on water and/or animal life. Section 13. Disposal considerations. This section provides guidance on proper disposal practices. Information may include a description of appropriate disposal containers, recommendations of appropriate disposal methods, a description of the physical and chemical properties that may affect disposal activities, and any language discouraging sewage disposal or avoiding landfills. Section 14. Transport information. This section will provide guidance on classification information for the shipping and transporting of the hazardous chemical by road, air, rail, or sea. Section 15. Regulatory information. This section identifies the safety, health, and environmental regulations specific for the product if it is not indicated anywhere else on the safety data sheet. And finally, Section 16, Other Information. This section indicates when the safety data sheet was prepared or when the last known revision was made. The safety data sheet may also state where the changes have been made to the previous versions. You may wish to contact the supplier for an explanation of any changes. Other useful information may also appear here. We understand that there is a lot of information within these safety data sheets that you may never have to use. In an emergency, it is important to reference the sections that provide you with information relevant to your situation. Remember, a brief guide to these sections has been attached to this training. If you are using a new product and you have not obtained a safety data sheet, you may be wondering where you can get one. If you have ordered the product, a safety data sheet may have been provided with the purchase. If not, you may directly contact the manufacturer and request one. They may respond with an electronic or physical copy. You may also find the sheet within an online database, such as a website designed to compile these documents, or within the manufacturer's official website. If this product has been brought into the workplace, you may also request assistance from a supervisor. We will conclude this presentation with 4 important recommendations for increased safety. First, ensure that you have easy access to your safety datasheet binder or safety datasheet collection before an emergency happens. Ask yourself, do you know where the nearest collection of documents is? Can you access them immediately? Second, consider reviewing the relevant safety datasheet information before using the actual product. This gives you a proactive opportunity to understand the relevant precautions and recommended safety measures. Third, always double-check to make sure you are referencing the correct safety data sheet. Do not use information from a safety data sheet for a similar product. Always make sure you are reading the sheet for the product that you are actually using. And finally, focus on the information applicable to your situation. Approach the sheet with an idea of what you want to know and go directly to those sections. For example, in the event of an emergency, you may wish to directly focus on Section 4 to read about first aid measures. Remember, a safety data sheet is provided for the protection and safety of yourself and others. When possible, maintain a proactive safety approach to the use of potentially hazardous materials. Thank you for your time. Stay safe out there.